State auditors and fiscal experts confirm that staggering government inefficiency and fraud have pushed California to the edge of a looming $35 billion annual structural deficit.
Okay, let's just unpack that for a second. Because that $35 billion figure, it's not just a headline.
No, it's a sign of something much deeper. And the sources we're digging into today, from the legislative analyst's office to the state auditor's own high-risk reports, they are all painting a picture that goes way beyond just a temporary budget slump.
It's a systemic issue. And that's what this deep dive is all about. The true scale of this government failure, the chronic waste, and this escalating fiscal crisis brewing in California.
The mission today feels pretty crucial because this isn't just about debt. It's really about competence, isn't it? The core problem is that this deficit is being, supercharged by chronic, just unacceptable levels of waste and improper payments.
Right, in programs that are supposed to be essential.
Exactly. And you've probably heard some of the high-profile claims swirling around political opposition sources. They're citing whistleblowers, and they've alleged that the state's total exposure to fraud could be as high as $250 billion.
And look, while that $250 billion figure is hotly debated and it absolutely demands a real investigation, the state auditor's official reports, they give us definitive proof of massive, measurable problems right now.
So this isn't just speculation.
Not at all. The auditor recently added the CalFresh food aid program to its high-risk list, and they kept the notorious Employment Development Department, the EDD, on it.
Which tells you the financial hemorrhaging wasn't just some pandemic-era anomaly.
Exactly. It's a continuous structural failure that is now, frankly, demanding some pretty radical solutions.
So our goal here is to nail down the hard numbers behind the mismanagement, show you why this fiscal hole keeps getting deeper, and then we're going to explore a really cutting-edge technological fix, a framework that might be the only way left to force state bureaucracy to be legally accountable to you, the taxpayer.
Okay, so let's start with the chronic condition. The overall state financial outlook. The LAO, that's the Legislative Analyst's Office, projects that California is facing an almost $18 billion budget problem this year.
$18 billion, and that's the immediate problem.
So that's the immediate problem. But here's the critical number. If current spending trends continue, the annual structural deficits, that gap between what the state reliably takes in and what it plans to spend, are expected to grow to about $35 billion annually.
Starting in 2027-28.
Right.
So $35 billion a year. And that's structural. For listeners who might not know that term, can you just quickly clarify the difference? What makes a structural deficit so much more dangerous?
It's an essential distinction, you know? A budget shortfall, that might happen because of a recession that lowers tax receipts for a year. A structural deficit means that even if the economy is booming, the state's ongoing commitments,
Right.
its baseline spending, is just inherently larger than its baseline revenues.
So it's a long-term built-in spending problem.
Exactly. It requires painful cuts or new permanent taxes to fix. You can't just grow your way out of it.
So even a great year for tax collection won't save us. State Controller Malia Cohen really emphasized this point. She warned that high revenues alone don't fix these underlying gaps.
And this structural issue is being made so much worse by agencies that the state auditor, Grant Parks, just keeps calling out. He maintains these high-risk designations for agencies that are just prone to costly inefficiency, waste, or outright fraud.
And what really stands out to me in the source material is just how long this has been going on. These aren't new problems, are they? Some of these agencies have been on this high-risk list since, 2007?
That's absolutely correct. It shows a deep, chronic inability to improve. And one of those long-term failures is the state's inability to successfully use information technology.
Which is just wild. We're talking about the global center of digital tools, and its own government IT has been a mess since 2007.
It's embarrassing, frankly.
How is that even possible? Is it just bad project management, or is it something deeper?
Well, it really seems to be systemic. And if you connect this back to the bigger picture, this chronic IT failure prevents the state from implementing modern, robust anti-fraud systems. They can't even do basic data cross-matching, which we'll get to.
And the cost of that failure is just massive. You see it with medical eligibility. The state is still struggling with discrepancies that, as of the 2021 audit, caused an estimated $1.9 billion in questionable payments.
And speaking of basic competence, just consider the state's financial reporting. The state controller's inability to produce timely, accurate reports is still a high-risk issue.
I saw that. The auditor noted material errors totaling $6.1 billion in the latest financial report. just related to education funding?
$6.1 billion.
Wait, a $6.1 billion material error? That's not fraud. That's just failing at basic accounting.
It is. That kind of error rate, it suggests a profound lack of financial control at the most fundamental level.
I mean, if officials can't accurately track $6 billion, how can we possibly expect them to ensure accountability for individual program payments?
It's nearly impossible. It speaks to the scale of the problem.
So, okay, we have a $35 billion structural gap, a state government that admits it can't run its IT systems, manage its biggest healthcare program, or even count its education money right. So let's move to the acute symptoms. The poster child for this failure has to be the EDD.
The Employment Development Department. Yeah, it remains the clearest example of mismanagement on just a staggering scale. The auditor's report documented that during the peak of the pandemic, just from March to December 2020, EDD paid out about $10.4 billion on claims that were later flagged as potentially fraudulent.
$10.4 billion.
Yeah.
And the details, they're just unbelievable. The EDD was paying claims filed under the names of incarcerated individuals.
Right, to the tune of an estimated $810 million.
The state was literally paying inmates who were already getting free room and board, all because EDD didn't have a simple system to cross-match claims with incarceration data.
Despite years of warnings. But it's even worse than just neglecting a database check.
How does it get worse?
The auditor found that early on, EDD staff made a critical internal error. They removed a key fraud safeguard because they misunderstood its importance.
They're kidding.
No. That single lapse resulted in payments of $1 billion to suspicious claimants over just 4 months. This wasn't just criminals exploiting a system. This was internal self-sabotage opening the vault.
And here's why this matters to the deficit today. The problem isn't fixed. The EDD is still a high-risk agency because its improper payment rate is still above the acceptable federal threshold of 10%.
That's the key. Their estimated improper payments totaled about $1.5 billion over just the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024.
And for the listener, improper payment can mean both simple administrative error and outright fraud. Right.
That's right. And the fact that the rate remains so high means the state is still losing billions from just basic administrative failures long after the pandemic chaos. The fraud rate alone was almost 8% in 2024, which is actually higher than pre-pandemic levels. The system is still fundamentally insecure.
And that failure is now creating massive, measurable costs that are going to hit the state budget directly. We're talking about CalFresh, the food aid program.
Exactly. CalFresh, or SNA as it's known federally, relies on federal funding. But new federal legislation tightened the error rate thresholds.
Okay, so what does that mean in practice?
It means that if a state's payment error rate is too high, the federal government can fine the state, or worse, shift the financial burden back onto state taxpayers.
And California's error rate for CalFresh was nearly 11% in 2024.
Which is significantly higher than the federal threshold. The state auditor noted that if this 11% error rate isn't fixed by 2028, California could be on the hook for about $2 billion a year just to maintain CalFresh benefits.
Let me make sure I heard that right. Because of chronic bureaucratic incompetence, the inability to figure out who is actually eligible for food aid state taxpayers could be forced to cover nearly $2.5 billion in costs that the federal government used to pay for.
That's what the numbers suggest. The LAO, the state's own nonpartisan fiscal body, estimates this change alone will increase state costs by about $1.3 billion in 2026-27 across just Medi-Cal and CalFresh.
This shows that government failure isn't just about headlines. It's measurable, multi-billion-dollar costs directly linked to an inability to follow the rules. So, if the auditors keep raising red flags and nothing happens, how do you hold these opaque automated systems accountable before the money goes out the door?
That is the pivotal question, and it connects this chronic problem to a highly technical but really interesting solution. Traditional auditing is just too slow. By the time they confirm $1 billion is misspent, the money is long gone.
The damage is done.
The damage is done. And the root cause, which academic research points to, is that these automated eligibility systems often use these vague, predictive statistical models, black boxes.
So the system might say, this person gets benefits because the model says so, but it can't say this person gets benefits because of Section 304 of the law.
Exactly. That disconnect is profound. Legal rules are complex, but the systems produce this opaque statistical reasoning that you can't trace back to the actual law. It's a huge liability.
So the answer isn't just buy better software, it's use software that can prove its decision is legally sound. This is where we get into this neuro-symbolic legal check framework.
Think of it this way. Instead of a human auditor checking if a payment followed the rule after the fact, this system uses technology to build the rule into the decision engine itself. It uses a hybrid approach, combining AI with formal, verifiable logic.
Okay, that sounds incredibly complex. Can we use a clear analogy, like, say, verifying a tax return? How would this framework apply there?
That's a perfect way to visualize it. We can break it down into three components. Imagine the law is the tax code, the input is your tax return, and the verification step is the IRS computer proving mathematically that your return follows the code.
Got it. So component one, the law itself, that's the T box or terminological box.
Correct. The T box is the official tax code. It translates complex legal text like the California Manual of Policies and Procedures for CalFresh into a formal, machine-readable language. It's a verifiable map of the entire legal universe for that decision.
Then you need the facts of the case, my individual tax return. That's the A box.
Exactly. The A box, or assertional box, is the case-specific layer. It captures the facts of an applicant's case income, dependents, and the rationale the system gives for its decision. And crucially, the A box has to use the same legal vocabulary that's defined in the T box.
So everything has to line up perfectly.
It has to line up. And finally, you have the judge, or the proof checker. That's the SMT solver.
The SMT solver.
Or satisfiability modulo theory solver. It's the formal verification layer. It compares the system's explanation in the A box, your tax return, against the rules in the T box, the tax code. It's a totally objective reasoning engine.
So if the system followed the law and the applicant is eligible, the solver returns SAT satisfiable. But what happens when the EDD system, say, removes a fraud safeguard and incorrectly approves a claim?
And that is the accountability mechanism we desperately need.
Yeah.
If the system's reasoning contradicts the law in the T box, the solver returns INASAT, or unsatisfiable. And here's the critical part. It identifies the exact violated statute. It doesn't just say error. It says Rule 304 Section B of the policy manual was violated.
That's the key difference. This moves us from just interpretability, where we kind of guess how a model decided, to normative traceability, where an outcome is demonstrably authorized by specific laws.
Precisely. It puts an objective legal guardrail around every single automated decision. It gives citizens the tool, a verifiable legal error report, to successfully contest automated errors.
So what does all this mean for you, the taxpayer? Well, we have a state administration facing multi-billion-dollar structural deficits, and they're driven, in large part, by chronic incompetence and a failure to stop massive fraud and waste. The state auditor keeps issuing red flags, but the core problems just persist.
This whole epidemic of fraud and waste, it's fundamentally a failure of accountability. It's not enough to stop human criminals. We have to ensure the government's own automated systems, which manage billions of your dollars, are actually obeying the law.
The current process of auditing after the money is gone has been proven, I think, to be completely insufficient.
It's just not working. The losses we've discussed are jaw-dropping. $10.4 billion in potentially fraudulent EDD payments, $6.1 billion in just accounting errors, a potential $2 billion in new annual costs for CalFresh.
And if the total financial exposure is anywhere near that $250 billion figure that whistleblowers are asserting, a number that really demands a formal comprehensive audit, then the stakes are just beyond normal budget fixes.
It's a different category of problem.
Which raises an important question for you to consider. If the status quo guarantees multi-billion-dollar losses year after year, could forcing these massive automated systems like CalFresh and EDD to prove their legal compliance using this kind of verifiable logic be the only way to finally build the absolute real-time transparency needed to protect taxpayers from this endless systemic government failure?
Because the cost of a solution like this, it's really insignificant compared to the staggering cost of inaction.